Hey guys, this is Caleb with War Council, and we are back. It has been almost 2 years since our last broadcast. We previously did 8 podcasts, and unfortunately we had to discontinue the War Council podcast, which we'll get into a little bit in the show and talk about why that happened. But the most important thing is we are back after almost 2 years. We've changed formats, we've changed direction, and we think you're going to enjoy this quite a bit. We are now going to be a hobby-centered forecast podcast. We're going to bring you all the latest hobby news, painting tips and techniques, and we're really going to focus on the hobby aspect of hobby, if you will. We're going to get away from trying to compete with the big boys out there that deal with battle reports and metagaming, and that wasn't really our strength, so we've decided to change direction entirely. In addition to changing direction, we've also changed co-hosts. Our previous host, Justin, left the show back in November of 2014, not due to creative differences. Justin has been a long friend of mine and continues to be a great friend of mine. But unfortunately, we just decided it wasn't the right direction for us together as a show. It was kind of hurting. You know, we just chose to go a different way in terms of the podcast, and we decided that it would be best if we stayed friends but didn't work on the podcast together. So we needed a new podcast co-host, and that brings me to Philip Corman. Philip is sitting across from me here in the studio.
Yes.
Philip comes to us from Northern Virginia, and he will be joining me for the podcast for the conceivable future, hopefully, unless I make him mad. So, Philip, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to White Metal Games?
Well, thanks you, Caleb. So I just moved down from Northern Virginia. We are in the North Carolina, Raleigh area. And what brought me originally to White Metal Games was I was just looking for work, honestly. As a painter, I'm a commissioned painter. And White Metal Games has a name for itself, and I figured it'd be a good place to start.
Oh, I'm trying not to blush. So you read about us online. We're coming to Raleigh, needed some work. And I pretty much put you to work pretty quick. Like within a couple days of you being here, I had you on a project.
Yeah, painting Cricks.
Yeah.
For
the War Hordes line.
Yep.
Yeah, for the War Machine line.
Cool models.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Very fun. So you come to us from Northern Virginia, down here now, and are doing some part-time work with me. In addition to some client commissions, we've really kind of tasked you with new releases. That's kind of the direction we've taken with that. So, for example, right now, Age of Sigmar. This is obviously all the new things on the block, new kids on the block, and you've been painting up all of our sample product for that. We've got that now listed on our eBay store and in our galleries and on our Facebook page. Can you tell us a little bit about I don't know, your take on Age of Sigmar? Like what do you think about it?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the painting side of that. How about that?
Sure. I mean, the models are very cool. They're beautiful beautiful sculpted models. And right now you'll find a lot of the Stormcast on the website. I'm still currently working on the Chaos side of it, but the Stormcast are great. Armor design, I mean, they have a very, very fluid, very dynamic, all the poses, and the heroes, of course, are beautiful. So I mean, it's a fun kit to work on, a lot of fun to paint. A lot of detail, surprisingly, with how big they are. They do have a lot of detail. So
yeah, whatever people say about the rule set with Age of Sigmar, which is very much still up in debate, no one argues that the models are not beautiful. Like, they're a great looking model. And in fact, I've spent many, many long hours debating with friends about the current state of Sigmar and that sort of stuff. But the models themselves are great. Games Workshop and the Citadel, are they still called Citadel, or is it Games Workshop? Have they dispersed the Citadel name? Is that
they still have it, I believe. Yeah.
So no one will argue that not the finest purveyor of miniatures in the world. I would argue, just well done, incredibly well made, computer generated. So a lot of times mold lines were hidden, which saves us a lot of time, which is great, which means we can save money to our clients because we cut down on assembly. Speaking of assembly, we are in the process of redoing the White Metal Games website. White Metal Games 2.0 will be launching in the next month or so look for that online, www.whitemetalgames.com. We will have our new rates published, and we're combining assembly and painting. on the new site. But we're not going to get into all that right now. We just want to let you guys know that we are actively working to update our site and bring it into a modern context. So we're going to move on to the painting desk. In addition to the new format of the show, we're going to have several new segments, and we're going to, rather than slap them all on you at the beginning of the show, we're just going to kind of go through them and kind of, let you know what the segments are as we come up, and then in the future weeks you can kind of expect them. So on the painting desk is a part of the show where we like to talk about what we're painting at the moment. It gives you an idea of the client orders we're working on, also our personal projects. Speaking of personal projects, Philip has his own Facebook page, Brushwork Minis. You will be able to find a link in our show notes. And he puts all of his personal projects on there, plus some of the white metal projects that he photographs himself. So be sure to check him out, Brushwork Minis. Philip, what's on your painting desk at the moment?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Age of Sigmar Chaos side of it, I am working on those guys, along with a couple personal projects. I was able to get a hold of Joan of Arc model made by Infinity Miniatures.
I have not seen that.
Very cool. Beautiful model. So I've been playing around with her a bit. She's I got more of a non-metallic metal theme going with a blue armor.
Okay.
We will actually be talking about non-metallics today.
That's kind of our center topic for today's show.
So it's a great way for me to test that and get a further idea of how non-metallics work.
Now, did you paint that specifically so that today you'd refresh your mind about non-metallic metal, or is this more like it just coincided with what we were doing?
A little bit of a refresher, but it really did coincide. I found the model in the box. I forgot I had it, and I was inspired to work on her. So
cool.
Yeah.
Infinity is well known for being incredibly detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that to be the case with her?
There's a lot of detail, yes. I don't find her, or at least that model in particular, very difficult to paint. A lot of the details, they're pronounced, and there's not a lot of overlaying parts.
She's cast in pewter, right?
Yeah.
Do you find the details are crisp still in pewter? Do
Definitely.
you think pewter still competes?
Yeah. In the sword and the sheath, they have hand scribed. There's writing inside of it, and it's perfect. It's not deformed or anything like that. You can see it very clearly.
Cool.
So yeah.
So Age of Sigmar, Infinity. Anything else on your painting desk at the moment, or that's pretty much? When we say Sigmar, it's a lot. It's not like it's one kid. It's like you are actively attacking those kids. We just put you on the Judicators. We're excited for the Summer of Corn coming out. All the corn kits that are now about to be in pre-order, and additionally the Sigmar starter is being broken down into blisters and boxes. So we're seeing that now. The Wrathmongers. What are the little cultist guys called in Age of Sigmar?
The Reavers?
Reavers. So the Reavers, I think, are either about to be released or are released. I didn't see any differences between the kit and the starter. Did you when you looked at it?
There are definitely some differences,
Is there?
and the weapon choices, and some of the ways that you can build the models.
Some more
they have
options.
some more dynamic poses and things.
This is different from when Games Workshop did the Cultist from their starter set, the Chaos Cultist, and it was basically just a copy. It was just the same.
Exactly.
It was the same sprue. So maybe they took some insight from that, from the just buyer feedback, and decided to, hey, let's go ahead and change this up a little bit.
And there's 20 in a box too, which is for the Reavers.
That's quite a bit. That's actually
it's a good buy, actually.
What's the price on that? I wonder.
58, I believe.
So that's actually not terrible. I think. I feel like their prices at GW are going down a little bit. Do you think that's about right?
Price per model, at least with this particular kit,
Like 58
it's definitely
not bad.
down.
Yeah.
But I would have expected, honestly, them to sell for like 10 for 40 is what I was expecting. So 20 for 58, it's a good deal, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And what's even better right now is that there's plenty of that sort of stuff. If you are an Age of Sigmar enthusiast, there's plenty of that stuff on the secondhand market. eBay is swelling with models from those sets. So it's never been a better time to get back into the game. We were talking last night with some friends of mine about Age of Sigmar, and we realized we have never talked about Warhammer this much in our lives. We were not Warhammer. I love the look of Warhammer, not a player. Not really. I played 1 or 2 games. But we've never been... They stirred the pot. They got me talking about it, which never happened before.
And they've started actually advertising and marketing themselves. I mean, I think they were at Gen Con this year, which I don't think they've ever gone to a Gen Con event or any sort of thing like that. So
I feel like they used to be in more of that stuff, and then they kind of dipped out for a while, but...
Probably like way back, but nothing recent that I've heard of.
This is back in the Ardboys days. This is back like when they were actually actively doing their own tournament scene and that sort of stuff. And
long time ago.
Currently on my paint desk, I'm working on some proxy models. And when I say proxy, I just mean something that, is a sample figure, something we're painting up. So I'm working on a Reaper Kraken from their Bones miniature line, which is a beautiful model. I like Bones in the bigger figures. In the smaller figures, I find that the details get kind of muted. And they're kind of wiggly, might be a nice way to put it. The resin is really
it's kind of flimsy, very
good.
It's not very fun.
So, but that being said, they're bigger figures like Kanjira, the World Breaker, their Tarask, and the Call of Cthulhu figure for, oh Lord, I'm going to be crucified. I can't remember his name right now. Cthulhu, just Cthulhu. Their Cthulhu figure and the Kraken. The bigger figures, for me, is where the money's at in Bones. You can get huge figures that would have previously cost an arm and a leg for fractions of that. Mm-hmm. And with the widespread release, you can really have access to them on the secondhand market for really cheap. I'm painting up some resin bases for another client. This is a client who's rebasing his Warhammer army, and he's going to rounds as per the, not the rule in Age of Sigmar, but certainly the preference, I think is a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
It's definitely the way they're releasing all their product now. So sent me up about 40 or 50 resin bases from Dragonforge, which is a maker of resin bases. They make quality bases. And painting those up for him so that he can rebase his army. Speaking of rebasing, we are going to be offering a rebasing special in the new White Metal Games 2.0. So for you players out there that have Warhammer armies that are looking to continue to enjoy them, but don't want the hassle of going through rebasing your entire army, contact us at info@whitemetalgames.com. You can also email us through our Facebook page, either this War Council or White Metal. And let us know what you're interested in, and we will be happy to discuss our new rebasing options for you. What else is on my desk? Oh, Sylvan. A friend of mine is doing some elves, some wood elves, and he gave me a box of Eternal Guard. He didn't give me, he let me paint them. So I'm painting up some Sylvan elves. I keep calling them Sylvan elves. I don't know why I'm saying that. The wood elves.
I think they're called. Well, no, Sylvanas is the tree guys now.
That's right.
That's what I think you're.
So painting those up, which is actually not as bad as I thought it would be. A lot of greens, and I sort of highlighted it up to a yellow. Warhammer is kind of a misleading game for me because it's like I always think they're going to be more detailed, but when I actually get down into the nitty gritty, not so bad. A lot of cloaks and that sort of stuff. So a lot of big areas where you can really sort of make the model pop with some airbrush work. So yeah, and I think that's about it on my desk right now. We are actively looking for clients, so if you are interested, contact us at info@whitemetalgames.com. I do have one other client commission right now. I have a Centaur project, which he's using an old set of rules. He's not using, I don't think he's using 8th edition. I think he's using a supplemental rule set from before. Were you a Warhammer player? I don't think we've actually talked about that too much.
I've only played one game, so no.
So no.
I'm a collector of the models, but that's about it.
Anyway, regardless of which, we kit bashed some pewter models, some pewter dryads, and some centaurs. The centaurs were some Native American centaurs, so vaguely racist, I think. Like in that they were Native American from the waist up and horses from the waist down. So I sort of pushed through the offended side of me and said, yeah, this will be fun. So kit bash those up. For those of you that don't understand what I mean by kit bash, Games Workshop does not like you using the word conversion. It's actually on their terms and conditions. They prefer you not convert their product. So we kit bashed these. Unfortunately, we didn't use any GW product for this. So really, they don't have anything to say about that. These were from some other line of miniatures. I'm not entirely for sure. But an older line, and you can check out the pictures from our recent conversion on our Instagram feed, which we'll also provide a link to in our show notes below. Is there anything? Oh, one last thing. So as you can see here, we work with a lot of clients, and when we're not working with clients, we do regular sample models. You can check out all of our samples on our Flickr gallery. We're also really excited about this orc project for the Warhammer 40,000 line we've been working on. I've always been a big fan of yellow. I know some people don't enjoy it, but I love how it pops on the table.
It's hard to paint, but yeah, it looks great if you can do it effectively.
So I did a tutorial on Bella Lost Souls about a month ago where I sort of showed a preview picture of one of the Dread Knights from the army. It's a Dread Mob, and I'm doing it all in the yellow hue of Oh man, I can't think of the orc faction right now that uses yellow for everything.
Bad Moon?
Bad Moons! So, I'm a big fan of Bad Moons, and if you are, check out some of our pictures on our Flickr page, as well as our White Metal Games Facebook page. We'll be finishing that army up in the next month or two. So if you are a Bad Moons player and are looking to add a Dread Mob to your army, this is the perfect opportunity, as this army has a ton of magnetized options, lots of walking, clanking robots. It's going to be a lot of fun to see painted up on the table. And it allows you to avoid painting yellow, which is can be tricky at times. Okay, we're going to move on to our next segment, News and Rumors. In the News and Rumors segment of the show, we're going to be talking about upcoming product, what's coming out next. What is coming out next, Philip? What's on the dossier out there?
So, as you mentioned earlier, Caleb, the Summer of Corn, so they're doing a lot of those releases throughout August. This week in particular, they're focusing on the Skaven. It looks like it's really just a reboxing now. So they're just going to be releasing them with the new round bases.
New rounds, new ovals. The big guys have ovals, the giant ones.
Yeah. So I guess I think that's going to be a couple weeks in the making. It's not 1 week of releases for them. So
I was hoping they'd release a few new blisters with that, but I haven't seen any yet.
I haven't even seen any rumors about anything new either for that. So I think it's really just... the Skaven just came out. Like, they just released the Vermin Lords.
I wonder why Skaven. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe because in the old what do they call that? In the End Times release, the Skaven Lord was a big release. He was like this giant Skaven Vermin Lord, I think.
Vermin Lord, yeah. So there's like 5 ways you can build them, but I think too, it seems like they're really focused on Chaos because they're starting right now. They're doing Khorne. Skaven is supposed to be incorporated into Chaos, I believe.
Yeah, they're kind of all under the Chaos theme, right?
And I think they're supposed to, rumor has it too that Tzeentch is coming out with their new releases as well.
That would make
Lord of Change. Oh, I can't wait.
See, back when the Bloodthirster came out a few months ago, it seems like it was forever ago now, but when he came out, there was all sorts of rumors about, they were going to have these big kits, they were going to be multi-kits where you could do him as like the Bloodthirster or as a named Bloodthirster, like Angeron, I think, the guy without the wings, like the Ruined
Forge
Wings.
World, yeah.
No, not Angarath. Angeron is a Bloodthirster from the Warhammer line that he pissed off Khorne. Khorne like bitch smacks him across like the galaxy or something, and his wings get ruined in the. So he's a Bloodthirster that can't fly. Basically which you say that way sounds awful, but he's got some pretty nasty weapons, and he's been a long favorite of converters like myself to build because he's such a unique model. And then in addition to that, we were hoping like when the big Tzeentch model came out, they'd have like they kind of do have a special Fate Weaver figure now. He's part of the pewter kit. But I was hoping the big kit would like double that, and especially considering there was a preview for a video game about a month ago for Warhammer. Do you play a lot of games? Like, or do you follow?
I do.
Games?
They have so many games coming out.
They did. But this preview had the end of the video showed a Lord of Change kind of hovering over this Empire Wizard. I think it's a game for like your mobile phones and your apps. It's like it's called like Age of something, not Age of Sigmar, but it's like it's like the equivalent of a battle game, like a World of Warcraft, but for Warhammer, which they've done before.
I think they've got the Rome Total War type game coming out.
Yeah.
Where I think that's got Chaos and Bretonnians and Orcs, so that might be where they're introducing.
I'm a big fan of Tzeentch. I've always been a huge secret fan of Thousand Sons, even though no one else really seems to care. So when the Bloodthirster came out, I was super excited that they would release all of the demons at that scale, like a giant Lord of Change, a giant, Slaanesh demon, Greater Demon, all of those guys. And named versions would be awesome. That so far, I think someone said it, on a post one day I read, like, eventually they'll realize that there are more demons than just Khorne and Nurgle. Like, Tzeentch and Slaanesh never really seem to get love.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like Slaanesh will not be getting any more love either, so...
Do you think those rumors are true?
I mean, they tend to be fairly accurate, and when you've got pictures that are leaving Slaanesh out of them...
For those of you that aren't aware of this, there's a lot of rumors going around now about Slaanesh being removed from the new edition of Warhammer. Like, he's killed by the elves or something?
He's lost. They just keep saying he's lost.
Oh, okay.
So
that's nice, because then they can bring him back in a supplement later and say, he's found.
Yeah.
Do you think this is probably a move on GW's part to make the game more kid-friendly, since Slaanesh is all about sex and drugs and rock
Yeah.
and roll and kind of like that sort of stuff.
I don't know. I always, because I started when I was a kid, so I think I was like 10 or so. I remember seeing like the Demonites and things, and I was like, "What?"
Because it was the first time you seen like naked, like boobies on
a model. I was like, "This
sure.
is." I mean,
This
we
is
were a very
not
conservative
PG.
family. We were like, "This is not right." So it's funny to see that that's kind of taken a turn. I don't know. I feel.
hate that.
Yeah,
Because I think that's a needed, like if you're talking about sort of a 4 horsemen of the apocalypse kind of thing, that you need that kind of lust demon. I think to sort of fill out the pantheon of demons.
Yeah, and I don't know why it's a problem now. Like it hasn't been for the last 20 years or 30 years or whatever since they were introduced. So
I feel like it's because they're aiming at a lower target mark, like a child audience, like not children, but like 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds.
But see, that's when I got into it, and it wasn't a problem then. So that's
were kids more mature back then? I would say they're more mature now.
I would
with porn.
They're at least
being on the
exposed
internet.
to
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff more.
Exposed is a good way to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not a good way to say it, but an appropriate way to say it. All right, real quick before we move on, we would be remiss if we didn't mention other releases that are coming out. Kings of War by Mantic, which is a game system that's kind of, I would say, like a cousin to Warhammer. It's like they sort of have armies that are similar, but they're in a 25mm scale, not 28mm scale. So they're a little too small for Warhammer, but people continue to use them anyway. They're releasing a mass release of all sorts of rules from many armies that aren't even released yet, like Ratkin and I think Sisters of Twilight is what they're called. They're like dark elves. And I know you're not a Kings of War.
I don't follow too much.
Yeah, but I think this was in response to Age of Sigmar releasing its rules for free. I think there's a sort of like, which I don't think is a great idea on their part, because I don't think you're trying to keep up with the puck at that point. You're not where the puck will be, to use a Kevin Smith analogy. You don't want to necessarily copy your neighbor. You want to stand out, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to tutorials of the week. Tutorials of the week is a section of the show where we will talk about a tutorial that we have either seen or read. It could be a podcast, it could be a blog, it could be a video from YouTube, which is probably where I'm going to get most of mine because I'm a little lazy and I like a visual. So as we've kind of hinted at so far, we're talking about we're talking about metals this week, painting metals, painting metallics, non-metallic metals. So Philip, I asked you to sort of look around and see if you could come up with a good tutorial for the show this week. What did you come up with?
Yeah, so for non-metallic metals, there is a fantastic tutorial going over the Age of Sigmar Stormcast Liberator. It's made by Painting Buddha, and it's a roughly 8-part series, give or take a few videos. It's long.
Painting Buddha is, they're trying to raise some money right now, I think through Patreon, which is sort of like an art version of Kickstarter, but you don't do it for projects, you do it as a general. Have you ever followed Patreon?
No, I haven't.
So basically, Patreon is one. I think it's supposed to be Patron, but Patreon is one of these sites where you give money to artists, and per video they are able to collect. So let's say I like you as an artist, and I say every time you do a video, I'll give you $1. So every time he posts a video on YouTube, he gets $1 from you. It draws it out of your bank account or your credit card. So they're trying to do that to keep alive. Because they don't. I think they're struggling financially a little bit. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I thought.
No, I mean that he's so the artist himself. I think there's 2 guys. They're very well known, actually. I guess in the competitive painting realm.
I think on Cool Mini they have a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they're very good. The series. This 8-part series is an in-depth look. So he paints the entire model step by step.
It's one model, not the whole set. It's like one.
Yeah. Sorry, it's one.
It's one Eternal.
But he's going through the entire model from foot to head. I mean, he's covering everything. So you see the entire process.
How long is about every video? I watched the first one, but I feel like it was about half an hour, maybe.
About 30 to 40 minutes each one.
So all told, and I remember in the first video he said like, we have 7 hours to do this.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
So that means he I guess the total videos are around 7 to 8 hours.
Yeah, roughly.
For one model, which is
yeah.
You know, so, I'm not going to spend that long on one model, but I cannot deny it looks great.
It looks beautiful. I mean, just looking at it, when you see the picture of it, you can't tell that it's non-metallic metal. And what non-metallic metal is essentially it's using basically flat paints, your basic average paints. Typically, if it's gold, you're using browns,
like acrylics.
But they have no metallic flakes in it or anything. So they're going to be flat base paints. And yeah, you're working mostly with whites, light browns, and dark browns.
For stuff like gold.
For golds,
and
yeah.
then for silver, like the whites, and I don't know what you do for silver actually, like gray maybe.
Grays, there's a lot. I see a lot of silver with blue in it, so they do a little bit of blues. It's a complementary color. I think it looks very good on silver, but he does this entire model with 3 colors for the golds at least.
That's incredible.
So he does it with 1 white. There's a light brown and there's a darker brown.
I saw him highlighting. I paid because blending is always it's a really hard technique to master, and I watched him blend white as a highlight color onto these golds, and he at first he puts down some white, and I'm like, that's too much. He's not going to be able to blend that. Blended the shit out of it.
Yeah,
just looks
incredible.
Great.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if he was using drying retarder, but so I don't know if it was like the paint was drying. Yeah, and what I mean by that is normally when you blend, you want to slow down the dry time on paint so it allows you more time to manipulate it. I don't recall if he used any drying retarder. I don't think he did.
I don't believe so.
Which makes it more impressive because he blends just as it dries, which is incredible.
It's essentially a form of wet blending. So from what I could tell, like when I first started watching the videos, it said non-metallic metals. I was like, this guy's a liar. He's using metallic paints. I didn't realize
because of the picture.
Because the video of it was so. I don't know if it's the camera or if it's just that he wets his paints down or thins them out so much.
They
looked very shiny.
Yeah.
I was like, this has to be metallic paint, but that's how he does it. He thins the paints down to almost very little pigment in the water itself. Yeah. And just
I remember the first layer I saw him put on, even he commented, it's like, well, it's not entirely even. But the more in depth you get into painting, the more you realize that the better painters, the big painters out there, the Meg Maples and all the other ones out there, they thin a lot.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to put down 5-6 layers to get to the point where you're satisfied with a layer.
I'd say even more, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so he goes through the entire model, paints it up in about 8 hours or so. I would say that he designates at least 1 or 2 segments of that just to the armor on this guy.
I think it's more. It's like at least 4 of the videos are actually just the armor.
That's incredible.
So, and the thing I love about like non-metallic metals, if you can master this or at least get a good understanding, it can be applied to so many different things. I mean, the big thing about understanding non-metallic metals and how they work is your light source. Where's the light coming from? Where's it going to reflect off of?
To give that idea that there is a sheen, even though when there's not a sheen.
Exactly, because that is non-metallic. You're painting the reflective areas of the metal.
Yeah.
Where you think the light would bounce off of.
That's a good way to summarize it.
So if you get a good idea or understanding of it, it applies to really any sort of texture. You can understand how light works on leather. Maybe it won't be as bright, but at least you can see, okay, this is where my light source is. This is where I need to apply the highlights.
I think he talks about that in the video too. They sort of have a brief debate about where the light source should come from, and he kind of says, well, it should be here, and then he proceeds to put it there. So yeah, absolutely, that 100% backs up what you're talking about. I've always wished, because when I first got into the hobby, I realized that people were there's a huge hate on for non-metallic metal, or for metallic metal. Like people seem to hate metallics. And I think it's because they're hard to work with at first. Like you have to, you get a lot of drag from the metal flake. It tends to dry, I think, kind of fast. I don't know if that's because the metals interact with the solvents. I'm not entirely for sure. You have to thin it if you thin it too much. So metal is tricky. What you get in the trade, though, is very fast coverage, I think, for the most part.
Certainly.
I wish that companies released, because here's my thought process. Let's suppose GW releases let's not say GW, Reaper. Reaper releases a paint and they call it gold. They just make it gold. So buried beneath the metal flake is an actual pigmented color. What I would love is if companies said gold paint, metallic, gold paint, non-metallic. And they just released them as both versions. So that way, if you wanted to have the non-metallic gold version, you wouldn't have to be like, what kind of gold do I want to use? Like, I would actually have the actual paint from that line that was indicative of what they used in their gold minus the metal flakes. Do you feel like, did people do that?
There are a few, I believe, if it's not P3, but I think Vallejo may have a non-metallic metal. The Scale 75 does actually have their non-metallic gold and silver.
Nice.
So it's like I think there's 8 paints in a box, and they actually show you some examples of how they paint it. But yeah, they do have that available.
I mean, when you really get down to it, like there's really only 2 hues of metal, warm and cold, and then you have a million variations in there like copper and bronze and blah 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 blah. So really, I think that once you get a firm center for like this is how I do warm metals, this is how I do cold metals, or this is how I do gold specifically, then you could probably add a little green for bronze or add a little this for copper, and you could kind of mix and match a little bit. On the Infinity figure, what you said you're painting her non-metallic?
Yeah, I'm using actually all blue, so it's it's not a silver or steel based metallic. It's more just I use the GW paint range primarily, and I'm using basically a combination of a dark blue, which is Cantor blue, and working up to a Fenrisian gray, which is like a bluish gray, kind of like the Space Wolves.
It's sort of a pale, like a really pale blue.
Yeah. So, and then a little bit of white for the reflective areas, and that's about it. So it's really 4 colors. It's the Cantor, it's Altdorf, Fenrisian, and then white, and then sometimes a little black in some of the deepest areas just to darken it, shadows and things.
Do you have any work in progress pictures on your Facebook page for that right now on Brushwork Minis?
Not currently. She's almost done, so I'll probably have her up in the next day or 2.
Great. So look for that on his Facebook page, Brushwork Minis, and I have not painted any Infinity, so I really have nowhere to go with that, but I'm super eager to see how that thing looks. Hey guys, it's Caleb with War Council. Are you a purveyor of stuff? Are you an entrepreneur with something to preneur? Do you sell things related to tabletop gaming, painting, or some other aspect of the miniatures hobby? Would you like to advertise to like at least 3 listeners a show? Then you've come to the right place. War Council has an unlimited number of sponsorship slots available. Each slot guarantees you a banner ad on the White Metal Games website, and we're like 300 likes on Facebook right now, so clearly at least 300 people could be bothered to click the like button at some point in time in their lives. For $20 a month, we'll promote you and your products on the show. For $10 more, you can have an entire 30-second commercial, like this one, only, better and more relevant and stuff. Email us at info@whitemetalgames.com for more information, and until you do, put your minis where your mouth is. We're going to move on to product review. Product review is a section of the show where we're going to dedicate a little bit of time talking about a product each week. It might be something new, it might be something old, it could be something that we've only recently become aware of. And we're not limiting it to paints or paint-related products, but we are sort of pushing in that general direction. Since we were talking about metallics this week, I decided we were going to talk about, I am going to review Liquid Gold by Vallejo. Have you ever used this before? I think we talked about this a little bit before the show started.
I don't believe I've actually used specifically liquid gold, and
it's confusing because they call it liquid gold, but they should just call it liquid metal because they have gold, copper, silver, white gold. It's an alcohol-based paint, so it's a little different. I think that when I first got into painting, I was confused about the solvents involved in paint. So basically, to give you sort of what I would call a very simple view of painting, paints are made up of 3 primary components: pigment, which is your color, solvent, which helps to dissolve it, and I can't think of the other ingredient right now. Something else. Which is weird because I've taught classes on it, and obviously those weren't great classes. But I'll think of it here in a second. Pigment, solvent, binder. Binder is the glue. It sticks everything together. Now, there's a million different additives that you'll find in other paints and that sort of thing, but those are your primary ingredients that make up paint. So when you think of, like, let's say weathering powder from Forge World or whatever, that's your pigment in its purest form, your most raw form, minus the binder, which is why you can rub it off with your hand. The binder comes in the form of when you varnish your model and it sticks to it. But in most paints, the binder is some sort of like agent that basically allows it to stick to the model. Effectively, when you actually make paint, you're kind of making like a very thin plastic sort of material, sort of, or a resin or something kind of like that. So the solvent helps to dissolve the pigments in the binder, and you make this sort of not wash, but it's like a soup. And that's how you kind of get it. I'm sure someone will disagree with me, but that's a very poor man's description of how it works. So what they do with liquid metal or liquid gold is they take away the basic solvent and they use alcohol as a solvent. So on acrylic paint, usually the solvent is something like water, certainly in water-based paints. And that's why when you mix it with water, it sort of thins out, or thinner. That's a thinning medium, which is also water-based. When a paint is oil-based, you have to use an oil solvent, such as mineral spirits. For example, whenever you use like a gouache, G-A-U-C-H, you have to use mineral spirits. For Vallejo's liquid gold, you have to use alcohol because it's an alcohol-based paint. Now, if you weren't confused already, the benefit of liquid gold, in my opinion, is that you can really take it and it basically sticks to the model, in my opinion, immediately with great coverage. And that's always my problem with not silver metals, not like bolt gun style iron metals, but gold has always been sort of my linchpin. It's been my Achilles heel. Because whenever I lay gold on, I have to lay 2 or 3 layers because it's such a thin color.
Yeah.
And that's probably because yellow, as a rule of thumb, is semi-transparent. So gold, being some derivative of yellow, I would argue probably, or in that gold family, would be thinner. The beauty of liquid gold is that it lays on fast and smooth and goes on really, really easy. And great coverage. You can see lots of video tutorials out there on YouTube. I'll see if I can't dig one up. There's this one guy I was talking about earlier that uses liquid gold for all of his metals, and beautiful looking colors. Great coverage immediately. Some downsides. One of the downsides is, unlike water-based acrylics, if you make a mistake, it can be a pain to clean up. So one of the things that they do is they'll a lot of times they'll apply a satin varnish to a model, not a flat varnish like an anti-shine varnish or a matte varnish, but a satin varnish. And what this allows you to do is do a little cleanup when you're painting. And in fact, I think I generally do this for a lot of my models, especially if I'm going to be applying, let's say, I don't know, colors later that I'm worried about. I may apply a satin varnish to a certain area just because of the fact that allows me to clean it up later. And by clean up, I mean like you take a Q-tip, you dip it in some alcohol for this, and you just rub it off.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That makes it so easy.
Super simple. And a lot of people out there will think, oh, if you put satin varnish on your model, he's going to shine and he'll shine forever and he'll be shining. Not true. Later you apply a matte varnish, completely gets rid of the sheen from the satin varnish. So you don't even have to worry about that. Like a lot of guys who dip their models. Have you ever dipped models? You ever do that?
I have not.
You don't dip?
I don't dip.
I don't think you for that. So I have dipped a few projects to experiment. I love dipping bases because it actually works really well for getting all of the ballast material to stick to the base. And because basically dip is like brown wash, effectively. At the end of the day, it stains bases really well. That being said, the sheen is absurd.
Yeah.
It's so shiny. It's so ridiculous. The only time I ever liked it was we painted up these cultists for a Slaanesh army one time, and the sheen made all of their black stuff look like dominatrix gear, which was kind of appropriate for Slaanesh. Right before Slaanesh dips out of the entire Warhammer world, is lost. Nice and vague. Anyway, so check out the link to Vallejo's liquid metal. It's important to note that they have this in every color you want. They have it in white gold. They have it in silver. They have it in copper. They have it in regular gold. I have them all because I never know what I'm going to need. And I think I'm on the Wood Elf project right now. I'm playing around with using the metals there. So if I do that, I'll post a link in the show notes and you guys can see a sample of it in action. I'll also try to find there's this, I cannot think of his name, it's killing me. There's a guy out there that uses it for all of his metallics. He painted up this Helldrake for the Chaos line using it, and I was blown away by how quickly he could trim out the model with the liquid metal versus regular metal. So check it out, liquid metal. Don't forget to use alcohol to thin it, not water. Not mineral spirits, as I made the mistake of. I tried that and I ruined a few brushes. Fortunately, they were cheap brushes, so I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, that is one thing real quick. Cleaning your brushes after using something like an alcoholic base. So how do you find, you need to use alcohol, right? You can't use water at all.
What I do is I have brushes that I specifically designate as alcohol brushes, or in that case those are my alcohol brushes, and then I have brushes that are my mineral spirits brushes, and then I have, in fact, we can actually talk about this real quick. So metal flake is obviously sort of one of those things that when you're painting metallics, it gets in everything. when I airbrush, and I airbrush with some metallics, like Vallejo metallics, and Miniterra's released some metallics too. I don't know if you find this or not, but if I use metallics in my airbrush, even when I clean out my airbrush completely, even when I wash it out, even when I put a few other colors in there, like I'll put a primer in there to try to get some of it out, I find that down the road, still a little metal flake in there.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do now is I have metal brushes for metallics, and I have non-metallic brushes for metals. And then I have two different paint pots, one that I use for washing metal brushes, one that I use for regular brushes. And then I separate my Vallejo liquid metal brushes, which are alcohol-based brushes, and metal brushes from my wash brushes for mineral spirits. So I have a bunch of different brushes out there, a bunch of different paint pots. But I find this works well for separating metal flake from non-metal flake. And my secret is I buy cheap brushes. I don't buy crazy expensive brushes that are going to cost me like an arm and a leg. I'm going to be honest with you, I buy like Walmart brushes. Like when you get like the 10-pack for like $5-8. Because I know I'm going to be really hard on my brushes. So I do that for all of my basic stuff like this. Anytime that I don't really care about the brush too much, like basing is a good example. Like what brush do you use for basing? And by basing, I mean painting bases.
Generally I use a very beat up brush.
Yeah.
It's frayed on all the edges, and I just smash it onto the base to get into
The only time that I run into trouble with that is when I'm going around somebody's foot, maybe.
Yeah. At that point I like to water it down a lot so that I can get around easily. I might have to use a decent brush at that point.
But if you ever make a mistake on that, do you ever find that when you go back, do you let's suppose you paint around a guy's foot. Let's suppose you use your frayed up brush and it's fine. Let's suppose you get some paint on the guy's foot. Do you A, clean up that paint immediately on his foot, or B, go lazy and kind of weather up his boots a little bit? Like, oh, it's dusty out there. Kind of weather them up a little bit,
I tend to weather it up a bit, depending on the what the scenery is. If it's a dirty area, just weather it up. If it's something clean, then you might want to go back and touch it up. But generally, when you got gravel and stuff at the feet, if it kicks up on the boot, it's not a problem.
I actually secretly, I've experimented with basing techniques in terms of like basing the model before I paint, basing the model after I paint, painting the ballast material, not painting the ballast. What do you find, just to sort of segue out of that for a second, what do you find is your sort of preferred basing technique when it comes to ballasted bases, not, let's say, resin bases or like flock or like lava, just regular dirt?
Typically, I like to, what I had done in the past is I would base it after I painted a model. What I find is it creates a lot of issues where you're getting glue on the model after it's painted, so you can get all this stuff.
You mean if you do it afterwards, you get glue on the
at the very end.
Like when you're applying it and you get some glue on his foot or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I've started doing now is I actually, when I build a model, I put all the gravel or whatever I want the basing to be, and then I just prime it all as one.
I like that because I feel like the paint works as a binding agent.
Exactly. Yeah. Because that's another issue. Stuff just kicks off so easily. The kind of glue I use is like a wood glue. It's a Gorilla wood glue, and that stuff is perfect.
You've been harping that on me for a little bit now. It's pretty great.
It doesn't break off. It's fantastic.
This is not the expanding glue, right? This is their traditional.
It's a wood glue, yeah. It's like your PVC glue.
Just out of curiosity, does wood glue? This sounds naive. Can you use wood glue on non-wood products and it works okay?
It's worked on sand. I use a lot of sand and gravel type stuff, so it's had no problems with that.
Okay. We'll have to do an episode where we do basing, and we'll have to compare your wood glue analogy versus traditional basing. All right, but moving on, we are moving into our next to last segment of the show, Tips on Technique. Tips on Technique is a part of the show where we're going to talk about anything we want in terms of technique, whether it be airbrushing, blending, wet palettes, and then, even away from that, just how do you work on your hand-eye coordination? How do you measure how much pressure you should apply for a certain technique? What's the difference between overbrushing and dry brushing? How do you paint eyes? Like, how do you develop muscle memory? Like, is there such a thing as speed painting? Those are just some of the ideas that came to our mind when we were discussing the segment. Obviously, today we're doing non-metallic metal versus true metallic metal, as Philip told me before the show started. So this is what we wanted to talk about was sort of the differences and kind of the pros cons, maybe, like non-metallic metal versus regular metallic metal. So why don't you've talked a lot about that? Why don't we try? We'll try this. First off, what do you prefer, non-metallic or true metallic metal?
Depends on what you're going for. Metallic metal, true metallic metal, is great if you're trying to do something quick, which you mentioned earlier. If you need to do quick painting,
So
it's
the
a lot
Sigmar stuff.
faster.
What are you doing on
Yeah.
those? Yeah.
Yeah, it's all metallic based paints for the Age of Sigmar. Generally, with anything that's like your standard tabletop type miniatures that you just plan on playing for the games and things, I usually use the metallic metal based paints. I usually reserve non-metallic metal strictly because, or mainly because of the time that you guys spend
Sure.
on it, is for higher end projects, something that you really want to stand out.
Standalone models, solo
Yeah.
figures.
Which is why Infinity was working great for that, because you have a small squad, 5 or 6 guys.
Sure.
It works. For an entire army, it is not practical whatsoever, but it looks fantastic. And yeah.
Do you find with metallics, my biggest problems have always been one, coverage, which is what liquid metal's good for, liquid gold, but specifically the silver flake. So when I thin out my paint, first off, metallic seems to dry really fast on my palette, like much faster than other
They
ones.
do,
I feel
yeah.
like. And additionally, the drag, and I don't know if this is actually a painting term, but it's something I've sort of coined, is that metal flake is actually like, it's in there. It's an actual element in the paint. It's like it's flakes of silver. It's silver.
Well, some use actual flakes of metal. Some use mica.
Okay,
So
which is
mica's
rock,
a rock,
right? Yeah.
But it's very reflective.
So if you think about this on a very, very small level, you're dragging rocks around in your paint. So of course it's hard to get coverage. Of course it's difficult when you paint it onto the figure to get it even out. And worse yet, when you try to pump it through your airbrush, man, like blockages, like you wouldn't believe. I have that experience at least, which is why a lot of painting companies have released their versions of like airbrush paint versions of stuff, which I love. Minutair has several airbrush paints that I use, and Vallejo, thank God, has a really good line of metallic airbrush paints that I use for airbrushing. So it depends on the project for whether or not you like true metallic versus non-metallic metal. Do you find that do you find that you get a better reaction from, like, let's say clients or like feedback forums or like posters about when you paint a metallic metal versus a non-metallic metal? Do you find that people I think that people in my mind gravitate towards non-metallic metal, that they don't like metallics, like real true metallics, and my instinct is that they don't like it because it's harder to paint versus necessarily better looking. So I guess what I'm asking is, what do you prefer when it doesn't come down to, like, what do you actually, I guess, prefer there? What do you find that people prefer?
In terms, I find a lot of pleasure in working with non-metallic metals. It's more fun to me. When it comes to the ease of it, I mean, you have a little bit more control, I think, over non-metallic metals, because you're choosing where you want the lights to go. You're choosing all of that, which can tend to lean itself towards a better looking model.
So you don't find that you do like a zenithal highlight for that. You find that you'll do, like, let's say a guy's wearing a breastplate.
Mm-hmm.
You may be like, well, I'll put the light over here on whatever the right, I don't know what,
right
peck.
shoulder or something.
Yeah, sure. And so the light will sort of scintillate. Is that a word? Scintillate? Kind of come down from that side. Is that about how you normally like? Sort of like painting Buddha, where he picks a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to pick a point. Typically, with the light reflecting and things, you have multiple points. Actually, it's usually not one shoulder pad that's getting all the light. It's usually some on the feet. You want to choose a few areas that you want to maybe stand out a bit.
Do you find that, let's use the shoulder pad example.
Mm-hmm.
So guy's got two shoulder pads on. In the miniature world, the sun is, let's say, over his right shoulder pad. Do you say, forget that, and just paint the left shoulder pad however you want? Or do you make your object source light appropriate to both shoulder pads to keep the narrative of the miniature true?
Yeah, typically, it really depends on the pose of the model.
Sure.
So, like, for instance, the one I'm working on with Joan of Arc, she has a big shoulder pad on one side that's...
Is she actually like a Joan of Arc looking like martyr kind of figure? I haven't actually seen this figure.
She's more like sci-fi armor, but she has a sword.
Okay.
And
it's kind of sci-fi Joan of Arc.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I have it going down primarily down her left side.
Is that where the focal
towards
point on the model is? Like
yeah,
she's
where
holding
her sword
up?
is.
Yeah,
Her
okay.
sword's on the left, and everything's kind of focused there. And on the right side, I've picked out a few areas that would probably be more in shadow, or if I use that one light source approach. But by giving her a couple different light sources, it helps bring everything out in different areas.
How many hours would you say you've put in on her so far? Being just loose. You don't have to be exact. Like,
Probably roughly 10 hours.
oh my god. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a nice looking figure.
Hopefully, yeah.
And I say, oh my god, like, because I'm more of a speed painter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could do. I can do one figure in 10 hours if I wanted to, but it's got to be a big figure. I'm not going to spend 10 hours on like an infantry figure. But I think that you're more of the line of like, I mean, for sure, if you look at, like, I'm not embarrassed about this. Philip paints way better than I do. I am super lucky that I met him because he's a great painter. But I think that for me, I want to get through stuff faster. Mm-hmm. So non-metallic is kind of like, it's kind of like, I don't want to do that.
Right. Which is why I say I reserve it for like specific models. Sure. I would never do this over, like all my Liberators for Age of Sigmar or anything like that. But
here's it. Just out of curiosity, I'll throw this idea out there because it's just occurring to me now, and I think it'd be interesting. Let's suppose you're painting up, I don't know, a tank.
Mm-hmm.
So you paint the tank, and you paint him in non-metallic metals. Then you wanted to show a chip or a bullet hole. Would you paint that with a true metallic metal just to make it look stand out or different? Or do you know what I mean there? Like a metal chip? Like when people show weathering on a model, that sort of thing? Because, for example, like a bullet hole, even if I'm painting, let's say I'm painting Ultramarines, and I'm painting them blue, and then I want to show a bullet hole, I would probably my standard technique is I'll do like a little dot of silver anywhere on the model, and then I'll put a little black mark in the center to show the 3D technique or the 3D shadow. So that works really well. But I've never considered it on non-metallic with true metallic. Like, I've never thought about how a metallic chip would look on a non-metallic surface in terms of like if you're trying to duplicate metal. I think that'd be kind of interesting.
It'd be worth trying. I've never thought about trying to do that. It'd probably stand out a lot.
Yeah.
You're getting a very
maybe in a bad way, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If anyone has an example of that out there, please send us a picture. I would love to see that. I was thinking about this a long time ago. I told you earlier on the show, I'm a big fan of Tzeentch and Thousand Suns. I really wanted to do a Thousand Suns themed army. Do you play 40K?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about that a little bit. Philip and I are both more hobbyists than players, I would say generally, but we both enjoy the game. With Thousand Suns, I always wanted to do a Tzeentch chapter where it was basically their suits are sarcophagi, so I wanted to do them in gold, and then kind of make it a weathered gold. So basically the idea being that I would, when you sort of see like a paint chip and you see the metal underneath, I was going to do that but with gold weather. So anytime there was a chip in their armor, it was going to be gold to make it look like their underlying suit of armor was gold, not metal. But cool. I tried it once. It was okay. But it's hard to sell that technique because without the context, people don't really know. Mm-hmm. So I think that the way that would have to work is you'd have to have some really big, like Blood Angel style, Tutankhamun heads to really sort of sell that it's a walking sarcophagus kind of thing. That's kind of off kilter. Okay, moving on to our second to last segment of the show, 1 minute rant, which I've been looking forward to all week. This is where we let it all fly, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we've decided that if we have anything we want to vent about, we're going to vent about it for 1 minute only. We're not going to go beyond that because we don't want to be haters, but we do want to get out our frustrations. I'm going to start this off. I think it's going to be a fun segment that we're going to enjoy. Since we're talking about metallics, to kind of round up our metallics discussion, I am going to rant for 1 minute, and I'm going to set my timer real quick. There we go. We have a timer on the show now. Great. I'm going to set my timer, and I am going to rant about, starting now, Reaper Dragon Gold. Reaper Miniatures is a purveyor of beautiful miniatures and an amazing line of paints, but what the hell happened, Reaper? You used to make this incredible paint called Dragon Gold. Dragon Gold was the deepest, darkest gold I'd ever seen. It was so dark. It was so rich. It had so much depth to it. You could buy it in a set where you had a couple different highlight colors. I used it for years. Finally get to the bottom of my bottle, go to buy some more a few months ago. Gone! Reaper Dragon Gold is gone. Could not believe it. I have tried to find, I cannot find a gold that competes with this anywhere. I hate GW golds. I think they're all basically too light, they're too bright, they're too shiny. Burnished gold is, in my opinion, kind of ridiculous. It's like, it's such a light gold. I've never seen gold like that in real life. So I've been hoping for years to find a really dark gold. I finally find it, Reaper Dragon Gold, and now it's out of production. Worse, nothing on their website competes with it. They have lots of different types of gold. They have gold 5 through 12 or whatever, but nothing as deep or as rich as Dragon Gold. So that's it. Reaper, what the hell, man? Okay, I'm going to reset the timer. Philip, I know you're probably nervous. It's okay to be nervous. Your first time.
No.
Okay, we're going to set 1 minute on the clock. Philip's 1 minute rant. Go.
Well, I really didn't actually have anything picked out for this 1 minute rant, unfortunately.
How surprising.
Yeah. I haven't had a lot of products. I will say there is a metallic paint out there that is very difficult to use. If you've ever heard of True Metal paints, it is a wax-based paint. And the cool idea behind it was that you could paint it on there and then you could burnish it or buff it out.
Okay.
So it almost gave a very reflective quality to it. Problem is you can't use it for like really anything. Like once it's great for one color, and then if you try to paint over it or wash it or anything, it looks terrible. Huh. So I don't know. I bought like 4 of these paints. There's gold,
were
they
they
silver.
expensive?
They're like $10 a piece.
Oh my god.
So they're not the best paints.
What is the name of these?
Yeah, they're called True Metal paints. I believe they're made by AK.
Oh Lord.
And yeah, they're not the best investment.
AK does make some good product.
They do, but I would not recommend these paints if you're trying to do metallics for miniatures. Maybe if you're doing like a basing and you have like a large metal sheet that they're standing on.
Paint. That just, I don't even understand. Is the wax the solvent?
No, the wax is the medium. You use mineral spirit to thin it.
Okay.
So it's another thing where you better have your own brushes.
It's an oil-based paint with a wax medium.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah.
That is insane. Is the coverage any good?
The coverage is actually pretty good. And then you want to go over with like a Q-tip or some sort of piece of paper to buff it out.
Wow.
And it does give a beautiful shine, but it doesn't go with anything.
So, True Metallic by AK. What the hell? Okay, those are some up our 1 minute rants for the week. And that takes us to our outro. We are out of here this week. Let us know in our feedback and comments what you thought about the show. Let us know if you like the new format. Let us know if you felt like Philip's 5 minute rant was less a rant and more of just a general displeasure.
Fair enough.
Be sure to check out all the new stuff we're doing. You can find us on Facebook or under War Council. You can find that directly under our White Metal Games link where we repost it. We are also on iTunes. iTunes is Apple's vehicle for podcasts. They have over 150,000 podcasts last time I heard. We are one of those, so be sure to check us out there. We'll have a link there. So check us out on Facebook, check us out on iTunes, listen to us in the morning, and we invite you when you're listening to us to paint a miniature. This is what the show's all about. It's all about metals, or not about metals. This week was about metals. Mm-hmm. It's all about painting models. So, bring a model, sit down, listen to us for a hot hour. Let us know if you like the new format of the show, if you think we're moving in the right direction. Philip, anything to any sort of final thoughts for the week? First show, how do you feel about that?
First show, it's a little bit different, new experience. But,
never done a podcast. Never even been a guest on a podcast before.
No, I have not. So this is the first. So
we popped your podcast today. That's what that is.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys listening in, and
absolutely.
We look forward to hopefully having you guys come back.
My name is Caleb Dillon with White Metal Games. With me this week is Philip Corman, and he will be back next week. And until next time, this is just a reminder: let your minis where your mouth is.